Okay, it says we're live, so I'm gonna just sit down here in the front to start with and talk. One of the biggest issues that has been in the news lately in the legal world, at least for us in the cyber world, is what?
Apple versus
They cracked the phone. Apple and the FBI, the gargantuan battle, all kinds of other stuff you can come up with, right? What's that really about? When we talk about the Apple versus FBI thing, that's just the latest round in an ongoing battle over what?
encryption.
Encryption.
Privacy.
Privacy. So, a while back, did I give you guys Griswold? Griswold v. Connecticut?
I think you
You
mentioned
may have mentioned it. I don't
I've talked about it,
know.
okay.
Specific cases I
I should probably have you brief that case. It's critical. Okay? So in Griswold v. Connecticut, we established the precedent whereby the Constitution recognizes a right to privacy based under, and I believe it went under the 14th Amendment and a couple others, but primarily the 14th Amendment. Okay? But the Supreme Court recognized that you have, even though the word privacy is not used anywhere in the Constitution, a constitutional right to privacy. Griswold v. Connecticut has been the basis for many, many subsequent decisions that affirm a right to privacy. But what is privacy?
Right.
We've talked about this a little.
The right to keep your secrets secret.
That's right. It's control. The modern definition is control. It's not to be let alone necessarily. It's not to be hands-off, hermitish, because being a hermit is nearly impossible in modern society, not to mention people are generally social beings. We're social creatures in general, right? Even the most unsocial person you know still needs somebody to gripe about how unsocial they are, okay? Because living is a social activity. And so being completely left alone is not part of the modern definition, the modern understanding of privacy. But having control over information and recognizing that is the definition also gives credence and recognition to the fact that information is the thing that's most worth control, right? FERPA. I'm not allowed to disclose your school records, not even to each other, right? I can't tell you what you guys made on tests. Oh, not that we do tests in here. But I can't tell you guys what each other made, right? We're barely allowed to get away with the peer assessments that we do. Barely. In high school, that might be a difficult thing to do, especially if your grades actually stick, because then you would know, if you graded her, you'd know what her grade was, right? You'd at least have a good idea. Assuming that the rubric was followed, you would know what the grades were. HIPAA, your health information. We have a law built around that you have a right to health privacy, right? We have legal protections. What's that called? For legal protections.
Client privilege.
Client privilege, right? Privileged communications, client privilege communication, client privilege, anonymity, privacy, secrecy, whatever you want to call it, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you can go to your lawyer and confess to a crime of intent, as in you intend to future commit a crime and it's a credible threat. They have to report a future crime some way, somehow, right? Ethically, they have to do that. But let's say you've committed a murder. You retain a defense attorney. That defense attorney doesn't know you've committed a murder. Their obligation under law is to provide you the best defense possible, right? If they don't know you have committed a murder, they can say, to the best of my knowledge, this man or woman has not committed a murder, right? However, if you go to your lawyer and you say, I did commit the murder and I want you to get me off of the charges. Why you would do that, I don't know. You should wait till after you are not convicted to tell your lawyer, because you're handcuffing them. They are still legally obligated, completely obligated to provide you the best defense possible within their means. But you've handcuffed them because they are also legally obligated not to lie to the court. The same oath you take on the stand is the oath they take when they receive their law license. Right? Can't lie to the court. Can't commit fraud in court. No perjury. Which means if you have told them, I committed this crime and you're going to get me off, Hi, Jennifer. I committed this crime and you're going to get me off of the charges. You have limited what they can say because now, to the best of their knowledge, you did commit this crime. But they can't say, to the best of my knowledge, that my client committed this crime, unless that's their defense, is that, and it was justified. That's when they start going into things like, I don't like my client. You shouldn't like my client either. But not liking somebody is not the same thing as murdering people. Right? You talk in circles around the issue. You talk about because not convicting somebody is about reasonable doubt. And an attorney still has the ability to create reasonable doubt, to create question in the minds, and it's up to the prosecutor, right? But what I'm getting at here is that even though this is one of the most sacred, the most hard and fast privileges of privacy in our society, there are still rules about it. There are still levels to it, right? There are exceptions to it. For example, like I said, confessing a crime that you are going to commit. Yes, I'm going to murder 5 people tomorrow. If you tell your lawyer that, and they have any reason to believe the threat is credible, they have to do something about it, right? Remember back to accountability and liability? They have to do something about it. Otherwise, they can be charged as an accomplice through negligence if those crimes actually do happen, right? Now, they're not obligated to do anything but drop a dime, right? Not that phone calls cost a dime anymore, and not that anybody could find a phone booth to drop one. But it wouldn't be a dime, right? I mean, if I were you, the best way is to say, I can't find my cell phone, can I borrow yours? To a random person on the street. Dial the number which you hopefully have memorized so it looks legit, and make your phone call anonymous that way. Just borrow somebody's phone who you do not know. Don't steal it, because you're a lawyer reporting a crime, if you recall the scenario, right? All of this is to say that even though we have a right to privacy, even though this right to privacy is established in the codified Constitution, not codified in the Constitution, but established in that Constitution and recognized in subsequent precedent-setting court cases such as Griswold v. Connecticut, we still don't know where we stand on encryption. Encryption is the current big legal gray elephant, okay? But it has been around for a long time. So, let's start out with Apple. Jennifer, we're talking about encryption in Apple today, and we're only using Apple as an example because we're actually going to go back a long ways. We're going to talk about a lot of different cases and a lot of rounds in this battle over encryption. Okay? But let's talk about Apple. Let's get that elephant, shine a light on it. What happened? What are the details of the case?
You want to go all the way back to the San Bernardino shooting? And okay.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the San Bernardino shooting is crucial to the understanding of the incident, is it not?
The San Bernardino shooter had a cell phone on his possession. It was owned by the city government, county.
County, then his employer owned the phone, right?
His employer on the phone. Okay, so
And-
now we have issues of possession and ownership, right?
The county messed with the phone or something, right?
Orange County messed with the phone, the Orange County lab, also the office that owned the phone, right? The public office that owned the phone tried to access it because they said they legally have the authority to do so, to try. Not that they were successful. So, let's start right there. How many of you have an Apple device or have ever used an Apple device? You out in TV land, some of you will have raised your hand or at least thought about it. Others of you will say, no, I only use Android. Well, kudos to you. Doesn't matter. Because it's the same problem with an Android. How do you access an Apple device? How do you access an iPad?
Passcode.
Passcode, cool. But I'm thinking more basic. How do you initialize it when you get it?
The setup process?
Setup process. What's the setup process?
Sign in.
Apple ID. How many of you use your work email for your Apple ID because it's also tied to your iTunes. It's tied to all kinds of other stuff, right? You use your work email?
Yeah, all my emails are like,
Is it a Sam Houston email
no,
address?
the Yahoo one.
That Yahoo?
Yeah.
And that's your
Yeah.
work address?
Yeah, so I am using the same ID for the Apple ID too.
Well, where do you work?
Price department, Chinatown.
Okay. So, but you use your Yahoo email address?
Yeah, I use that.
Oh, so you didn't use your work email. You're a perfect example. Okay? Because Farouk, which was his name, didn't use his work email address either. Most of us do not. In fact, Amazon, for a long time, wouldn't let you have access to your corporate store without a personal account, and they would tie your work account and your personal account together. And you had to access and place orders through your personal account for work. Crazy. Yes, and the Apple system forces people into that same situation because if you're going to log into an iDevice, an iOS device, you're going to want to log in across platforms. You're going to want to use it here, there, everywhere, right? You're just going to say, oh, I have an Apple ID, and you sign in. Okay? So now we have a problem. It's back to ownership and accountability. We haven't even gotten near encryption yet. Ownership and accountability, and privacy thereon too. Who owns the account? Farouk. It's your email address. If you sign into anything with your address, you still own the account no matter what, right? My Gmail account, I'm using my Gmail account. That's my real Gmail account to broadcast this to the world, okay? That is my real account right there up on the screen. That is my personal email address because I can't access YouTube with my school address, right? It's not set up that way. The service doesn't work. And you guys picked this over the other service, although the other service, apparently they just rolled out a new edition. Might be awesome. We might try it again before the end of the semester. I really like the YouTube videos, though. They make things so much easier. So it's undeniable that the county, the public office owns the phone, right? And I'm sitting down because my back hurts. The county owns the phone. The public office owns the phone. I forget if it's city or county. It doesn't really matter. County? We'll go with county. Okay? They have every right to do anything they want to that hardware. But unless they distributed that hardware with a policy of specifying what type of account can be used to log into it, the only services they would manage on it and have control over are what?
Those directly related to the business.
Those directly related to the business, which are frequently email, right? So unless you have an app for it, like if there's a Sam Houston app or a Blackboard app that tie to those services, you'd be able to manipulate whatever data on the device are manipulable through those systems, right? So you'd be able to remotely wipe the email because that's a protocol that Exchange supports. You would not be able to remotely access the camera, for example, right? It's not designed that way. Privacy concerns alone are an issue. Have you heard about the school system that gave MacBook Pros to all of their students, one laptop per child in high school? That's awesome. Hooray! Congratulations. Well done. They also installed anti-theft software. Very fiscally responsible. Well done. They did not establish a policy and procedure for when that software could be used. And it's the same issue here. Because students are allowed to use their own personal accounts. They can check their email. They can check all kinds of stuff. And this software was capable of grabbing screenshots. This software was also capable of gathering pictures from the cameras. Low web cameras. How many of you have ever left your laptop open, well, anywhere where you might get naked? Like if I'm listening to Pandora in my bedroom and changing clothes? Now, I don't really have to worry about people wanting to look in on me in my bedroom changing clothes. But when you
That's
can-
an issue.
Yeah.
It's not really an issue.
You might be horrified.
Like, whatever, okay? But when you talk about people in high school, I was in much better shape in high school. You might have wanted to look in high school. More importantly, people who have daughters have a problem. And so this system came to light that there was a lack of controls in place when a father got a call about his son from the school principal. And the school principal says, "We need you to come in right now. Your son has been caught smoking pot, marijuana." And of course, the father is like, "Well, crap." He goes to the school, and the school says, "Here's the evidence." And shows him pictures of the marijuana being smoked in the student's personal bedroom at the father's house. And the father takes one look and says, "That's really bad." And the principal says, "We agree." And he says, "Yeah, no, I'm not talking about the marijuana. I'll handle that later. I'm talking about, that's my house." Right? Privacy. His daughter is also a student at that school. His teenage daughter, who also takes her laptop issued by the public service to her bedroom. They weren't trying to create child pornography, but essentially what they'd done is they created an engine that was nothing but a child porn generation machine by taking pictures all the time. And these students were doing their homework in their bedroom naked. Because some people do that. Some of you probably do that. Don't send me pictures. Not saying it has to happen. Exactly.
Attachments within that.
Okay. No. I'm really glad we do peer grading in this class. All of a sudden, you'll just be showing your pictures to each other. And then
But there comes the example
And then-
of low grades and high grades.
And then-
Somebody's going to be very unhappy.
You know what? I'm adding a
Right
line to the
there.
rubric. If you include pictures that your audience finds distasteful, your audience may choose to rate you down for those pictures. There's a new line in the rubric. It's on tape. It's being recorded. Okay. I think I've gotten my point across about ownership of the hardware versus ownership of the accounts versus policies and procedures that have to be in place to guide the usage of that technology. Hi, Mark. Welcome. I'm sitting down today because my back is killing me. And also, I'm right below the microphone, so I hope that works out well. Is the sound all right today, guys? You can just type yes or no in the thing, or you can use the microphone.
That's good.
So what does all this have to do with encryption?
Encrypting is if you're talking about this relationship to privacy, encryption is usually used for the purpose, or in some cases, privacy.
Well, in some cases for the purposes of privacy, in other cases for the purpose of integrity. We want to make sure it didn't get changed from point A to point B.
Built-in privacy.
It's built-in privacy protection. There's a lot of services that build in privacy protections, right? In one of the links I sent you, there's a whole laundry list of applications with built-in privacy protection because they natively include encryption. So, let's talk about a long history of encryption. Everybody know what a Caesar cipher is?
Mhm.
What is a Caesar cipher? My favorite cipher because it is alliterative.
Basic monoalphabetic cipher.
Basic what?
Monoalphabetic cipher.
Yes! All you do is shift the letters, right? Sometimes you scramble them if you're fancy. Okay? Then you need a decoder ring. That's all it is. Encryption is not new. But the debates around encryption, we've been trying to break encryption as long as people have been creating encryption, right? How many times did they shift the letters? What is the code? Blah, blah, blah. Right? So let's go back into U.S. law. Anybody know what law was cited by the court case as in the initial Apple court case after San Bernardino when the FBI took Apple to court? Or actually when the FBI took the phone to court? Because they didn't actually take Apple to court. Apple just said no to the court. What law did they cite? It was old.
The all writs.
All writs.
That act.
Yep. It's a very, very, very old law. It was literally signed by George Washington. Just for context. A law that was signed into being by George Washington, which was a subset of the overall law that established the court system as we know it today, gave the judges, remember at the beginning of the semester I told you that judges were the most powerful people in the country? As long as the case they have has something to do with you. If you recall me saying that at the beginning of the semester, and if you don't, I'm saying it again. Judges, if you fall into the purview of their case, are the most powerful people in the country. Any individual judge, if you fall under their jurisdiction legitimately, you fall under this. And the All Writs Act gives them the power to issue what? Writs! For what purpose? And what is a writ? It's an order. We frequently say court order now instead of writ. And frequently, if you order a writ, it's separate than a court order. If you go through the strain of actually saying you're issuing a writ, that means you're issuing a writ because you are calling on the authority of a writ. Right? It's not just the court says do this. It's the court says you have to do this. So says George Washington. Thou shalt. Exactly. Okay? And so this All Writs law, this law signed by George Washington, is called into play and cited in the decision of the judge who issues the order to compel Apple to cooperate with the FBI. Not only that, but the judge issues a very specific set of orders to Apple. Anybody know what they are?
Create a backdoor to their iOS.
That concatenates it quite nicely to create a backdoor into iOS. But it was very specific. The judge got real specific. A backdoor software to allow the FBI to circumvent the password lockout of the phone in iOS, etc., etc., etc. Okay? It was very well laid out what the judge was after. It doesn't mean the judge has a right to ask it, but he then cited the All Writs Act as his authority to ask it anyway. Okay? Not ask it, compel it. When you're faced with the All Writs Act, it's pretty dangerous territory. If that was an individual, if it were you and I, we'd be in jail. For responding the way Apple responded to a court order under the All Writs Act, we would be in jail. Right? Writs are only supposed to be issued when there is no other law that can be relied upon to handle the current case. Okay? And frequently, if a writ is being issued, it is precedent setting. Because they are issued in cases where there is no law to handle the issue at hand. Or the concerns at hand, since I shouldn't use issue twice. Right? Hello, Mr. Jones. So, after the judge issues the court order, the writ, to Apple, how does Apple respond?
They refuse.
They say no. Not only that, but they take the nuclear option, which is known as the open letter. Some of you have recently become in possession of a nuclear option open letter. Ignore it. You either know what I'm talking about or you don't. In the department. So, this open letter to the public saying we're refusing and this is why takes it out of just the court and out of whatever the media is reporting and puts it squarely in public so that it's in the public's eye, which is one of the ways to make sure that due process is followed in these things. But not only that, they say you can't compel us to do this because it would essentially, and they're going to take it to court and all that, right? It would essentially break the privacy, which is under what case? Guaranteed to all people? Griswold v. Connecticut, recognized as a constitutional right, you have to privacy. And so Apple falls back on this constitutional right to privacy. The Constitution supersedes an act. The All Writs Act is an act. The Constitution is the law of the land. And so they're falling back on constitutionality as opposed to one of the earliest laws on the books. And it's 1789, signed by George Washington. Okay, so we're talking like original framers' intent kind of stuff. Does the constitutionally recognized right to privacy trump one of the oldest laws that literally provides the authority of the court system at and below the Supreme Court? It gives that same law gives the Supreme Court and all subsequent courts created by any act of Congress, by an act of Congress, that's how the wording is, to issue writs to compel cooperation to meet the needs of the court. Okay? The problem is when the needs of the court outstretch the bounds of the case. That's when you can fight such a writ, as Apple is doing. So, what happened in the case? Originally, the judge says, no, I'm compelling it. That was it. That was the lowest court order there, right? Apple says no. They go back. What happens? What happened in the case? How did the case end? The case is over. The FBI did what?
Well, the phone didn't
According
get
to the
open.
internet, contact the friends over in Israel.
Actually, the friends in Israel contacted them. They reached out to the FBI themselves. Okay? And we'll cover that here shortly. But the FBI, hours before, like not even a full day, but hours before the court case was scheduled to be heard, filed a motion to dismiss the case, to drop the case. I mean, they were catching a lot of flack over it, right? I mean, even Bill Gates weighed in and said, I think the FBI is right. I don't know if you... I've done a lot of reading over the last week to make sure I could talk about this subject. Bill Gates took their side, Tim Cook took his side, and the world is right because Apple and Windows, Microsoft and Apple are at each other's throats, right? The status quo is maintained.
Apple encryption goes down.
It is true.
Excuse me.
Yeah, did Bill Gates, did it say whether or why he sided? Was it
He
moral
also-
or was it the business side? Apple goes down and stuff.
No.
He's not associated.
No,
Okay.
he's his own guy now. He's just a philanthropist. And he wrote a letter, he gave interviews and all kinds of stuff. Okay? So this is not a new fight. I provided you with lots of links in your email to go over to learn about this ongoing fight. There are a ton of incidents, and I want to cover a couple of them for you. Okay? The FBI, the DEA, various other federal agencies have been seeking to regulate, limit, or even eliminate, in some cases, encryption since computer and digital systems started out doing encryption. Right? Because what makes law enforcement harder than encryption? There's only one thing that makes law enforcement harder than encryption, in my opinion.
Fourth Amendment.
No! A lack of crime. That's the only thing that makes law enforcement harder is a complete lack of crime because there's no need for cops. Because they can't do anything. If the encryption is strong and it's working properly, the cops can't do anything about it. Law enforcement can't do anything about it. That's the whole point, because nobody can do anything about it. The FBI, the DEA, various other agencies argue stridently, strongly that this is not okay. Their argument is that for reasons of national security and whatever else, they need to be able to have a window in. It's not that it needs to always be open, and it's not that it this, it's not that it that, whatever. They need to have a backdoor into these systems to be able to catch terrorists. That's only new marketing, and it's not even really new. Terrorists have been the talk of the town since the 60s. Go look it up. Okay? The only thing new is that we stick the word Islamist in front of it these days. It used to be all kinds of others. Well, no, every time it was communist terrorists. It was hippie terrorists. Pro-life, pro-choice, whatever terrorists. Pick your word, pick your battle. Separatist terrorist, Timothy McVeigh. Also known as a domestic terrorist. That's a boogeyman word. Okay? Terrorist is not a new boogeyman. But it's also foreign actors. Right? One of the reasons that we were successful in World War II is because we managed to crack the Nazi encryption engine, the Enigma. Right? We salvaged an Enigma and we reverse engineered their encryption and we're able to decrypt their communications. It's one of the reasons we won the war. So they have a pretty solid case for justifying that needing a backdoor can be a matter of national security because it was literally a pivotal point in World War II. That's a pretty strong argument, right? And so now the question is does Apple's case stand in the face of Nazis, in the face of nuclear holocaust, in the face of pick your poison, in the face of a radical movement to eliminate Americans, which is the movement to which these two subscribed. That's the argument of the FBI, and it sounds compelling. I even start to believe it when I say it like that. Right? Because it is. It's compelling. Everybody wants to be safe. I want to be safe. You want to be safe. I don't want to get shot going home because nobody could listen in on the terrorist that they knew was a terrorist, likely a terrorist. I don't want that to happen. But I also don't want pictures of my daughter when she's a teenager going to the school principal. I don't want that to happen. Right? Now we've talked about privacy. We've talked about cases where thermal cameras were excluded. Right? Because Antonin Scalia, the late Antonin Scalia, wrote in his opinion what? Didn't I say this in class? I feel like I did.
Oh, you don't need
It's,
to see my wife.
yeah, I think
The time and manner in which the lady of the house takes her bath.
Yeah.
Yes. Right? And so clearly it is possible, and the Supreme Court recognizes that it is possible for government to overreach in terms of invading your privacy, and that encryption is a tool, an effective tool to protect that privacy. Okay? Does anybody remember the DEA complaining about wiretapping? Anytime, take your pick. Okay? Or the FBI complaining that they can't listen in on something. Because this is just a phone. This is data at rest. Right? But there's a 2005 law, which is in your email, in that list. There's a 2005 law that compels ISPs, Internet Service Providers, to cooperate with wiretaps if authorized by warrant. They have to literally build into their architecture, and now most enterprise architecture providers, networking architecture providers, build in at the ISP grade shunts to siphon off and to listen. They have to cooperate with digital wiretaps authorized by warrant. They have to provide a raw feed of the pipe that they have for which they have a warrant. And all data relevant to that warrant has to be siphoned off, logged, and provided to the entity with the warrant. Since 2005. Since 2004, your phone has been mandated to have a GPS in it. Cellular assisted GPS, ostensibly for 911 identification, but also usable by law since 2004. But also usable, this one's not in your email, also usable to track you in the same way and with the same systems that the 911 people track you, but by different parties. Right? Look up Harris Stingray, that's a keyword for you here. Look up, look up cellular phone location and cellular assisted GPS. Okay? Because I want you to understand the entire gamut of this issue. So now, what is encryption? Modern encryption. What does it look like? What's the most common types, etc.? And how many of you prefer to use encryption? What are the drawbacks to encryption?
So typically encrypted data will just look like random data.
Sure.
You have no idea that it's actually there or what it is.
You don't know what it is, that's for sure, right? It looks like random data. It looks encrypted because these days we can tell if it's encrypted by looking at it, because otherwise it wouldn't look like that, right? Sometimes it's just compressed. It's funny, if you look at a JPEG, it looks a lot like encrypted data, even though it's not, because it's compressed data. JPEG is a compressed image format, and so it changes periodically as you resave the image, and it recompresses, and it resets itself because it's meant to optimize on storage size as opposed to quality. Which is why if you've ever used Photoshop, you have to set your quality levels and compression levels and all that stuff when deciding how to save your JPEG. Right? So yes, that's what it looks like. It scrambles everything up nicely. What else does it look like? Where do we use it?
E-commerce transactions primarily.
It actually turns out that the majority of traffic is now encrypted by default by most major providers. Except when it just doesn't matter, such as like watching a Netflix stream or a video stream that is not private. Right? Even then, sometimes it's encrypted. Well, if you don't want people shunting off and getting Netflix for free, now granted, they'd be at the whim of what you want to watch. Just saying, it's easier to sidejack your session and just take your account. But that's a different class. That's not this class. And that's also illegal. Don't do that. Okay? There's the cyber law perspective on sidejacking and sessions and stealing accounts. Illegal, don't do it. But since 2014, Google, Facebook, and a couple of Amazon and a couple others that we use have gone to default encryption all the time. All data encrypted all the time. You want to see what they're doing? Cool. Look over their shoulder like an old-fashioned person. Because you're not going to be able to see it over the wire. Okay? When you can't see things over the wire and you can only see them on the screen, you start to develop tools that can look over shoulders. You start to develop tools that are going to look at your user activity. You start to develop these tools. How many of these tools do you think are extant today and used by law enforcement? It turns out extant today is a red herring. I did that on purpose. And I should have waited longer for better effect. Because the FBI came out with a program called Magic Lantern, which is a heck of a name, in 2001. Or let me rephrase that. The FBI's Magic Lantern program was disclosed in 2001. And it was an endpoint tool. Okay? It was part of the often criticized, often cited Carnivore program. Carnivore program is one of those programs that came to light long before the NSA's program came to light, where the FBI had developed this tool and program to siphon off data from computers that they could target. It was government malware. And it didn't really come to light until a whistleblower at Symantec, I believe it was, said, hey, just so you know, the FBI is asking us to install a whitelist for government malware. Now, legally speaking, not illegal, because the private company has a business choice and was not compelled by a writ whether or not to include a whitelist. And of course, Symantec came out immediately and said, we don't whitelist. That's not a thing. We promise it will show up. Whether or not that's true, don't know. And they used this program up until 2005, and who knows what they replaced it with. I don't know. It's amazing. When meeting FBI agents years ago, and I would tell them what kind of tools they had in their arsenal. Because it was apparently so secret to begin with that it should never have hit the news, because FBI agents who weren't using it didn't know it existed. And these are the challenges. These are the reasons people want to use encryption. And it's not just because it's the FBI doing it. It's also the bad guys. The bad guys are perfectly capable of using encryption. It can also be used for bad. In what cases can encryption be used for bad? Online guys, anybody? How is encryption used for bad by bad guys?
Terrorists sending encrypted messages within images or anything to their compatriots across the world.
Sure, they're using it for communication, and they're using encrypted apps, they're using stegged images, they're using all kinds of stuff, right? Even just PGP, good old, pretty good protection, email encryption. That's one way they're using it. They're also using it as the actual attack. Anybody heard of that? You nodded.
I just heard about PGP.
Oh,
or the canard.
no. PGP it stands for pretty good protection, and it is an email encryption tool, suite, whatever you want to call it. Okay? No, I'm talking about BitLockers. I'm talking about ransomware, right? Because encryption was designed to protect you. Encryption was designed to hide and keep you. It was designed to make sure your files are your files. Except that if you're not the one who encrypted your files, it means you're not the one with the key to your files. Ruh-roh raggy, as my wife likes to say. She likes Scooby-Doo. Right? So there are, I'm not going to tell you which department it was, and it wasn't the Huntsville Police Department, but a regional small police department within 2 hours drive of here, which includes about, I don't know, 30 or 50 departments, yeah. So I've anonymized it well enough now, and it was in Huntsville, so we're -1, whatever, in -1, okay? Got hit 2 years ago with ransomware. Their entire system at this agency, this law enforcement agency, their entire system, evidence management, case management, log traces, everything was locked out, and they had to pay the ransom to get it back. They paid the ransom, and they got their stuff back. And that's why I'm anonymizing it, because they would never want me to tell you about this. But they called me immediately, and they said, "Do you no, it's the perfect crime. There's no evidence of the incursion on the system. They wiped that part out when they decrypted it." And it was a whole disk encryption, and so all of the space that's not used
became an encryption.
Yes!
You're not cracking that.
No! Okay? So encryption it can also be used for illegal means, not just as communication, but as the weapon. Okay? Which is another compelling case for when you design an algorithm like this, building a backdoor so that you can unlock it. Now that doesn't stop the bad guys from learning the math, which is another issue, right? Can you illegalize math?
There's some people like to.
Well, it depends. I mean, in some countries around the world, they legalize all kinds of stuff. They legalize normal ideas we consider to be normal, right?
I mean, the technology to build an atomic bomb exists in physics.
The technology, the entire E equals mc squared is the math, essentially, from which all nuclear weapons can be derived. There you go. E equals mc squared, go build a nuke. Don't build a nuke.
Well, how do you make
Right?
that illegal?
How do you make, it's the most famous equation out there other than like 2 + 2. Right? But I can even talk about things like critical mass, critical geometry. Any idea what those are? Because they make nukes. Okay? There's the keywords. It's also critical mass is like roughly 2.2 pounds of U-235. I can't talk now. Right? I can't even tell you why I know that. Because I literally can't. I don't know why I know that.
Fun fact.
I don't even know when I learned it. Okay? I can't remember not knowing it, but my grandfather was in charge of the nuclear arsenal for the southwestern United States. That might have something to do with it. But I don't remember when I learned it, right? You can't illegalize that. Just like the math. And so saying that you're going to only build encryption systems with backdoors means that you're going to illegalize making encryption systems by anybody who doesn't include a backdoor. Right? So when do you make exceptions? When do you make exceptions for law enforcement systems? When do you make exceptions for DoD systems? When do these exceptions happen? Because the DoD does not want a backdoor in their system. They just want a backdoor in everybody else's system. Right? Now, when we're talking about this, we're talking about it in abstract terms because there is a lack of solid precedent. Is there a precedent in the Apple case?
There have been previous
Yeah, they've done it.
accounts where they have unlocked before.
Okay, there you go. That's a procedural precedent where Apple has helped with accounts in the past, and they had said they were willing to help with this one if it hadn't been messed with ahead of time, right? It's that evidence tampering that is an issue, and their assertion is partially that the FBI is to blame because they're the ones who advocated for this quick response, which amounted to tampering because it didn't follow the normal procedure and rules for access to this type of evidence, right? There's a case in New York right now where Apple and the FBI are at odds again. It's very similar. And that judge sided with Apple. And so now that judge has actually sided with Apple in his decision, and it's going up for appeal because that judicial body, the prosecutor, is appealing the decision to the circuit court, right? And then in San Bernardino, in that circuit court, the Ninth Circuit, I think, in that circuit court, they dropped the case, which means by de facto, Apple wins. By de facto, but not by decision. And so the precedent is that the case gets dropped. The precedent is not that Apple wins the case the way a lot of the headlines, and I included, that's actually the headline of one of the links I sent you. If you don't get the impression that I want you to read all these links, you're wrong. Okay? That's kind of the whole point of tonight. I want you to read these links. But there's other examples. And many of the examples have been settled or ended without being settled the same way as this case. 1993, the Clipper chip. Anybody remember the Clipper chip in the news? So, cell phones. Remember when cell phone cloning was a big thing and you could just pull a cell phone signal out of the air, clone the phone, talk on their minutes, that was a thing? Or at least it was in the movies. It turns out it was a real thing. And so they immediately started working on ways to encrypt that. They wanted to make sure you couldn't listen in just on a radio like I can on your walkie-talkie. Even our walkie-talkies have digitally encoded signals now, right? The kids' toy versions have 14 codes. Not just channels, codes. Channel 1, encrypt code 14. Right? I mean, and they've got like 30-mile, it's ridiculous. 30-mile ranges, okay? And they're $50 at the store. I would have killed for those toys as a kid. Yeah, Toys R Us is not a bad place for the apocalypse. Just go to the Spy Kid aisle.
Yeah.
Okay? So the Clipper chip was a chip that the government was trying to force manufacturers to put into products that would do wireless communication and encoded communication to let the government, on a warrant only, of course, listen in to the communications on that device. Right? So basically, you just need to know what code was in that Clipper chip, and you could access that Clipper chip and listen in. Technology progressed so fast that that case was never settled. The Clipper chip died because technology outstripped its capabilities. Okay? So we were left with a big gaping hole in precedent and in decision and in knowing how we should proceed. Right? We don't know. That was an opportunity to settle this decision. That was an opportunity to end it. We know where we stand, where the government's rights start and ours end. But we don't. I need to check my links real quick.
Looking for one of these links. Oh, there it is. It's the first link. That's why I couldn't find it.
One that you select?
You're in editing mode.
So now I'm going to share a little slideshow that includes things like in the algorithm, because it seems appropriate. Okay, online guys, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so we covered the All Writs Act. There you go. The Clipper chip. There you go. What about this one? The Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act. This is the wiretapping act that I talked about. That I couldn't remember the name of. It started out forcing telephone providers to cooperate with wiretaps, right? Because a warrant, just a warrant, a search warrant, gives the police the right to take actions that they need to. So I could go outside of your house, to the pole outside of your house, climb up there, pretend to be a repairman, and listen to your phone on one of those little handsets, right? But that doesn't, is that the best way to listen to all your phone calls? Because how long does a phone repair really take? Can I leave my guy up on the pole for
4 days
months,
straight.
you know.
yeah, just stay up there and listen, right?
Flower shop.
Or maybe they put something on there that broadcasts it over, right? But that's detectable. Bug sweepers, you can still find bug sweeping devices that are broad spectrum antennas that they go to tell you if something's transmitting, right? You can find bug sweeping devices still at the back of every popular science. They were very popular in the Cold War, and it turns out that the Cold War may not be over. Ask Putin. And so that you can still find these bug sweeping devices, right? This law got around those problems of ubiquitous technology allowing for people to do countermeasures, right? By forcing the ISPs to become complicit in these warrants. And then they extended it in 2005 to include the digital systems, so that you have to, upon a warrant, you have to cooperate with a digital shunt as well.
So the law requires the service provider to
The law
build
requires,
this into their system, regardless of cost.
the cost is not referenced in the law. These days, it's already in the system. It's built in. It's just the next generation of hardware after that. It was a feature. The one after that, it was standard. It's just part of how it's built, right? Then we get SSL, which helps us get everything encrypted across the wire. And they're thinking that 70% of the world's internet traffic will be encrypted by the end of this year. That's all internet traffic. Then there's the Patriot Act. Anybody remember this one? The Patriot Act also established the FISA court, which allowed for secret warrants. So not only do we now have warrants, which must be complied with, we now have FISA warrants, which are secret warrants, which are not allowed to discuss. They come with a default gag order. You're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed. You have to cooperate with it. And they also allow for a sneaking peek, where you can go in and you don't have to disclose that you were there. And they allow for default record searches without an actual warrant at businesses. That was fought in the courts and largely not decided. I don't remember. I leave that to you to look up if it's part of your decision in the assignment I'm going to give you. If it's part of your decision-making paradigm.
I have a question. So does that mean, so if the court for the wiretapping phones, if they serve a warrant and say we need you to tap this, we need the wiretap of this phone, like, can that company go to its client who's being tapped and be like, by the way, you'll never guess what just happened. Law enforcement just served a warrant.
That depends on the wording in the warrant. Because you could get slapped with obstruction of justice, you could get slapped with interfering with an ongoing investigation, you could get slapped with contempt of court, because it's a court-ordered document, right? And if it's a FISA court, this may all happen in secret.
Well, it's federal.
Then there's Operation Aurora, 2009. Operation Aurora is when Google didn't want to cooperate with China anymore, and China said, all right, we're going to hack all the things. Because the groundwork is already laid out there. right? All these systems are there. There's shunts in the backbone to make sure that we can comply with FISA warrants, that we can comply with CALEA warrants, CALA, the law enforcement assistance one, right? And so now China says, you know what? We want all the stuff, which was used and held up as an excuse, a reason and rationale why we need encryption. Then there's BlackBerry, right? Research in Motion, RIM, funniest name ever. Research in Motion, the makers of BlackBerry, were renowned for the privacy of their devices. Renowned. And then for what we can only imagine is a fairly large, substantial remuneration from the Kingdom of Saud, also known as Saudi Arabia. They provided a backdoor to the kingdom for BlackBerry communications happening in the kingdom. This did two things. One, it compromised the principles of that service, right? For a buck, probably many bucks. But it showed that the service was compromisable. It showed that a backdoor was possible and that their architecture allowed for it. Objectively, it showed that it was not that difficult because they were able to turn it on and turn it off, provide a shunt here and there where needed when they decided to comply. I'm not going to go into Snowden. That's a you thing. If you want to go into Snowden, you go for it. But it talked about PRISM, the NSA's PRISM program. The implications of that program are far and wide-reaching. And then there's encrypted messaging. Remember I told you that that's my timeline I wanted to go through. And I also want to point out that it's missing some things, like the FCC is not mentioned, for example. Right? Because we regulate communication. We've regulated communication for a long time. When was the FCC established? Federal Communications Commission?
Back in the day.
Back in the way day, in the heyday, in the 1930s. Alex, can I get the Great Depression for 300? Okay? The FCC is very old. Our recognition of the need and right of the government to regulate communication means is not new. Right? Because what happens when we use all the radio spectrum and we start stepping on each other's feet in the radio spectrum? Nobody can communicate. Right? There's only so much radio spectrum. Now they auction it off like it's a cattle or something. And we subdivide it more and more and more, and we go higher and we don't really go lower. We've known about low frequency communication for a long, long time. Right? But we keep going higher. We're in the 5 gigahertz, 10 gigahertz, whatever, microwave communications, etc. Right? So the distinction is the majority of the encryption debate previously has centered around what we call data in motion, which is the actual act of transferring from point to point and encrypting en route, right? And so when you encrypt from end to end and only the endpoints can see it, that's data in motion, okay? And the majority of laws are around data in motion. What makes the San Bernardino and other cell phone cases where they want access to information in the phone different is that's what's known as data at rest. Okay? This is the first time where encryption of data at rest has been at odds with interests in national security and where there's no legal framework really for us to fall back on, because the previous philosophical arguments around encryption have been about data in motion. I want you to realize this is the huge distinction. Data in motion versus data at rest. And I want you to read some security blogs, take your pick, and learn about encryption of data in motion versus encryption of data at rest. What are the differences, the distinctions, the approaches? Because encryption of data at rest is how malware has weaponized encryption, right? It's not like they're frying your signal as it goes over the wire. You would just resend it if it didn't get there, right? In fact, the entire TCP/IP stack is built around resending your signal if it doesn't get there. The entire resiliency of the internet is making sure that your signal gets there, even if it has to be rerouted 1,000 times between here and there in the blink of an eye. Right? Packet 1 might follow trace 1, packet 2 might follow trace 2. Doesn't matter because it's all going to get there. It's all going to be synchronized in the right order because that's what TCP/IP does. And if one's missing, it's going to request it back. Right? So the encryption battles previously have been about what we're doing live in real time now. And the new encryption battle is about what I have, what I can hold, what is static, what I have in my possession.
Because modern encryption can't. It's harder to control, or
Oh yeah, every single day encryption gets better and better, which makes it harder and harder to break. Right? We had a discussion about passwords in the department just the other day, discussing password length as an indicator of strength. Because we had a visiting researcher who asserted that with enough randomness, because in the system he was proposing, every single login had a new password. And he had a system for managing those passwords, and I won't go into that part. But he asserted that only 5 characters, when it was random every single time, provided enough entropy to make the system secure. And so the big debate that we were having is that enough entropy to keep the password from getting guessed? Right?
use 4-digit PIN number.
I do. I use a 4-digit PIN number on my iPad. Right? Most of us do. The San Bernardino people did. And if the FBI had had 10,000 attempts, they would have been able to get into it. The problem is that San Bernardino, the county or the city, whichever one we never really decided, whichever one it is, we're following what are known as the best practices around data protection at rest. And those best practices around data protection at rest indicate that a device that is hooked up to their enterprise network via email must comply with these security requirements. Those security requirements establish a policy that forces the device to wipe the data after 10 bad login attempts. Everybody up to date with that? And so this is where even industry best practices, which they were following by establishing that policy, and they probably just did it because that's what we're supposed to do. Somebody said that, we think it's a good idea, let's go with that. I doubt they even gave it more thought than that. I can't speak for that for sure. But the implications are clear, that it made it all the way into the national highlights, that it's in a focus. And the only reason they dropped the case is because this Israeli company, Cellbrite, was able to come up with a way to circumvent that step in the process. Okay? That is the only reason they were able to do it, is somehow, and I'm sure that the technical details will come out around the time that the next iPhone is delivered with a mitigation feature, right? Because every time you crack the previous generation of hardware, the next generation of hardware is designed to defeat that attack. And whatever Cellbrite did to get into this phone, the next generation will dodge that attack, because that's how this works. It's an iterative system. And then Cellbrite and all their competitors are going to start working on breaking the next one, or at least circumventing it in some way. This is when I fall back on my graduate project when I was in master's level courses like you guys. My capstone project was breaking biometric security with low-tech means, because they spent so much time protecting them against high-tech means. And all of their security approaches were designed against protecting against high-tech means, that they forgot to handle the low-tech means. Okay? This is basically, I would steal your fingerprints off of something you touched, and I would recreate your fingerprints and make a fake fingerprint pad. Straight up Hollywood style. It would take me about an hour and a half total. And I could get into anything you locked with your fingerprints. That was my project. Okay? I'm currently working on a portable kit for the Texas Rangers for that. It's awesome. Okay? And so when it comes to this type of thing, I don't even know why. I'm sure that there was probably a fingerprint sensor on that phone. I don't know why they didn't just take his thumb and stick it on it. Just saying. But I wasn't there, so I don't know for sure, and I'm not familiar with the model of phone that he had specifically, right? I know it was a 5 something.
That was the.
5C.
Yeah, that's what Celebrite was ranked like.
Right.
We can go up to a 5C.
We can do, right, and that's because now they can't. We can do up to a 5C, they can't do a 6C. Or maybe they can and they're not telling. Although they usually advertise very quickly when they can. So, all of this tonight is about making sure that we understand that the issue of encryption is hotly contested by both sides. Passionately contested by both sides. Have you heard of Tor? The Onion router? And the Tor browser, the Onion router browser? It's a browser that is specifically designed and implemented around anonymity online. By routing your signal Hollywood style around various places and connections all around the globe, you can circumvent privacy controls in your area. Right? Think of it as the ultimate proxy server. Except that if you can get yourself in the routing protocol, in the route, with about $3,000 in hardware, Carnegie Mellon de-anonymized 100,000 Tor users in under a month. It's an ongoing battle. Okay? And then the FBI approached Carnegie Mellon for those names. And because the FBI, and that was another big stink that I hope you find when you're researching this issue. The FBI approached Carnegie Mellon, Carnegie Mellon provided that list, and then there was a big kerfuffle because civil liberties activists were saying, hey, the FBI shouldn't have that list, and the FBI says, we got it from a private entity. Private entities can give us anything they want, right? Because in order to obtain those results, the FBI would have had to jump through amazing hoops. Because there are names on that list that have nothing to do with ongoing investigations, except that maybe they're doing something they shouldn't be, or they're just paranoid, because they're using an onion router. The only reason to use an onion router is to hide your traffic. Now, if you're hiding it because you jealously guard your privacy, that's one thing. The argument is that the majority of people who are using the onion router are using it to get to dark web, to get to bad things, Silk Road, etc., for example, right? So I want you to start to look into, because this is one of the critical issues facing not just cyber law, but cybersecurity, information assurance and security, and digital forensics. It has implications for all of the above. It even has implications for straight computer science, because the computer scientists are going to be the ones that implement, that design the new algorithms that are going to be implemented by the cybersecurity people, and the digital forensics people are going to be the ones who are faced with the task of overcoming those for investigations, or at least finding techniques to backtrace them for investigations. And so the goal of this discussion is to make sure that you have some context, because I'm going to pose a very simple question for your next assignment. Who's right and why? The FBI, now you can pick the FBI, you can pick the DEA. The FBI is also going after WhatsApp, so you don't have to go after their stance on Apple. You can go after their stance on encryption in general. You can go after the federal government's stance on encryption in general. But which side is right? Do we have a right to wholehearted, strong encryption, or does the government have a right to get in? Should there be a backdoor? Yeah.
Can we argue middle ground?
No.
No?
Pick a side. No fence setting.
Okay. Not even if we argue away for that middle ground?
I don't know. What's your...
So I personally think the FBI should be able, so I think there should be kind of like if you, same with the wiretapping thing, but same thing. Award means Apple gets them in, but Apple gets them in.
But
Like with a
Apple is then forced to design their systems in such a way that there is a backdoor, because their argument is that there currently isn't a backdoor. They
So
designed it
even
that way
if
on
they got a
purpose.
warrant, there'd be no way to get it.
Exactly.
Well, they can get in.
They could have gotten into this
Exactly.
phone if they hadn't
Yeah.
tampered with it.
Yeah, they know how to do it. Sure. But if there is a back door, others will use it.
And I believe I referenced the Intel case.
Yeah.
Because Intel, remember they had their strong encryption hardware encoded backdoor. into at the hardware level of computers, look up that case, right, or that story, because that's not a court case, right? And if I recall, it only took 6 months for those keys to leak and for every single system that implemented that technology for that backdoor to become vulnerable. And Apple's assertion is that that's what would happen if they built their system that way.
Everyone.
And so the question to you is, who's right? Which side is right? Use the resources I provided you. Use the stories we used in class to find more resources, and use those resources to find more resources. Back your case up. Okay? Find examples. They are out there. The goal of this is not just to take a stand, it's to justify that stand, preferably with legal precedent when possible. But remember that writs are being issued in this case because legal precedent is not always available. Actual law is not always available to handle the issues presented by these new cyber systems.
ACM format?
Yeah, always, yeah. The only thing that's not ACM format is a brief. And next week, I can already tell you what we're going to do next week if you want a head start. Next week, we're going to do a case brief on Griswold v. Connecticut because you guys need to know that case. And we're just going to keep plowing through the semester. But next week's easy. That's one case, Griswold v. Connecticut. So if you want to knock them both out this week, you can. Okay? Now, the assignment that was due today, I say was in the past tense because I'm going to go ahead and make it due Friday because I can't trust that everybody will be able to get to the turn-in box between now and midnight or now and midnight tomorrow because not everybody watches these videos or checks their email every day on a regular schedule. Even though you should. Good. Okay? What happened? I set the assignment up based on the previous version of the assignment from the previous semester where I taught this last year. That assignment was originally due later in the semester and also in 2015. And when I copied over the assignment, it copied over the old due date instead of the new due date that I thought I had specified. And so it's set for April 22nd. And I haven't figured out how to get rid of that one. And at the beginning of class, before we started recording, I was discussing that with these guys. I have a call into Blackboard to figure out what happened there. And I'm probably just going to spool up a new assignment. So watch your email. I will send out when the Dropbox is available for the current assignment, which was the conceptual. For those of you who haven't done it, God forbid, it was the conceptual essay on the changing landscape of liability and accountability with cyber-connected systems and fully automated cyber systems, like self-driving cars.
So it's basically like we did with the amendments, but instead of cyber contextualizing the amendments, we're cyber contextualizing the concept.
If you remember, I used the exact phrase, I want you to prognosticate. I want you to predict the future of changes with regards to, because if a self-driving car with no people in it hits another self-driving car with no people in it, who's responsible? Because neither owner is responsible for the conduct of that vehicle. The services that the software that drive those vehicles is probably responsible, but how do you hold software responsible for an error where previously you would by default hold the person responsible, right? There would have been a person there. So in the past, before these automated self-driving, whatever connected cyber systems, there were people to hold accountable. What happens when, as the landscape in the future shifts, and whatever system it is goes digital, and if you need an example of this in the past, look up THERAC 25? 55? THERAC radiation treatment. It was the first example, look it up, and I think it's THERAC 25. It was the first example of a software-controlled, a microsystem-controlled medical device that screwed up and gave lethal doses of radiation instead of life-saving doses of radiation. Okay? That would be the first time where this happened, where people who did lazy computer programming got other people killed. Okay? And that's the start of this new landscape, and we're headed there full force. I was being followed by a damn Google car last time I was in Austin. Okay?
Like the self-driving
And I
car.
kept the self-drive, there was nobody in the driver's seat. And the whole time I'm thinking, I'm not a bus. I'm not a bus. Don't hit me, I'm not a municipal bus.
It's a little bit, you can go.
Ah, yeah. I love my car. I don't want to have to.
You could have had
my car.
the newest model.
Mine gets better gas mileage than the new model. The new model's faster, but this car is plenty fast. Okay. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Have I addressed everything? I covered the assignment that didn't post properly. I've covered tonight's content, which is encryption. Remember that the distinction and the changing landscape is around the distinction between data in transit and data at rest. Right? Online guys, any questions?
Not here.
Awesome. The assignment's pretty straightforward, I think. It's an easy question, hard answer. This is not an easy answer. You'll find that the classes won't be as long the rest of the semester, but the work is probably harder. It's more mentally intensive. Next week, we are going to cover the legislative process as it pertains to your final assignment so that you have a full month to get that assignment done. Okay? I want to make sure that you have plenty of time to get that assignment done. We're not going to watch Schoolhouse Rock,
Darn.
but mostly because it's going to be recorded, and I think that's a copyright violation since I've then republished these on YouTube. Okay? All right, hearing no objections, that's class. Jennifer, I did read your stuff, and I don't think I posted your grade to Blackboard yet, so if there is a 0 there, ignore it. That's not your real grade.
There wasn't a 0.